What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Tech N9ne. And basically, this album is called Absolute Power, and it came out in the fall of 2002. So this was a hit album after Tech N9ne's underground hit album and Juggalo hit album, Angelic, from late 2001. That basically was a pretty smash hit and got Tech N9ne a lot of underground buzz and stuff. But this album is the first on his Strange Music label that would hold folks like Ritz and Chris Calico and Cut Calhoun and some of them. Definitely a large music label, definitely a very successful underground hip hop kind of label and stuff. But this album from Tech N9ne kind of has spirits of kind of horrorcore on here, along with some gangsta rap, and then also like some kind of like a more low key version of the stuff that Eminem was doing kind of in the early 2000s. Where if you're looking for like, if Eminem was like a vanilla nightclub back in 2002, 2003, Tech N9ne was the more kind of sleazy, hole in the wall kind of strip club kind of places. It just kind of gives off that kind of vibe to me, where this is just kind of, I don't want to say for downplaying Tech N9ne, but he just kind of came off as more of like not so much the poor man's Eminem, but just kind of a lesser powerful punch of Eminem. I would have to say he has the same lyrical cadence and that type of stuff, and it really has like some of these lyrical vibes in that same aspect that Eminem does. Not to say that he's a similarity, but just the context of these kind of ruminating rappers that have some real impact. I just feel like Tech N9ne, I would definitely have to say that Tech N9ne has some quality on this album. This is a pretty superbly produced project. I definitely feel like some of these like Rubonics and Ron Z from Berlin, and like some of these other ones on here are like 5150 Mental Productions, just a bunch of these cats on here. They do some pretty rock solid job. And the fact that Tech N9ne was kind of distant in these early 2000s days from charting on like Billboard Hot 100 radio and that type of stuff. Like really the only song that charted even remotely was just Here Comes Tech N9ne, which basically hit 40 on the rhythmic radio. And rhythmic radio is definitely more for like underground artists, folks that were not on quite on the scale of charting, but definitely making enough noise to get airplay and that type of stuff. So that was Tech N9ne's territory back in 2001, 2002. But this is a pretty rock solid album. I definitely feel like it's going to get a rave score, as you'll see as I dissect this album and stuff. Definitely a lot of good things to talk about. This is a Juggalo classic. This is an underground rap album classic. And this is definitely one that needs more praise, considering the fact that this has got to be one of Tech N9ne's best albums. I feel like this one, Angelic, KOD, possibly even Ever Ready, The Religion, some of those type ones just really have some powerful feels towards it. And it's been a while since I reviewed Tech N9ne. It's been actually quite some time. I wanted to return to the Tech N9ne fold and kind of touch base with Tech, because I'm going to start reviewing more of his stuff as time goes along. Probably, definitely try to find some more of these from the 2000s, like Ever Ready, The Religion, and some of those, maybe even Killer, the double album. We're just going to get to some of these. So, like I said with my initial description, this is very much a strip club, nightclub kind of album. This is just very vanilla in a lot of ways. Yeah, like I was trying, like I was saying about the social feel of this project, this is a very vanilla nightclub kind of feel about it, very social and that type of stuff. This has some nice bops on here. Some of the ones like Slacker and I'm a Tell and Here Comes Tech N9ne and I'm a Playa, She Devil, T9X. I mean, some of these are just really excellent for that, but we'll go ahead and get into this. So, the first single off this album was Slacker, and this came out in 2002, around the time when this released. So keep in mind, there's not an overabundance of information about this album. I mean, it has enough to have a Wikipedia page, but it doesn't really have the concrete details. This is because this was quite an underground album and didn't really chart that heavily. So even over 20 years later, this doesn't have an overabundance of information. But Slacker was at least noted to be the first single, and this is definitely like an oozing promo kind of like jam. This has like a real kind of charismatic, this nice promo kind of bop towards it. This is a simple bop, and I just kind of feel like this is kind of one where you're just kind of stepping out, maybe going to see movies or just being somewhere in the city where some place where it's got flashy lights and that type of stuff. But this is not necessarily at the house. I don't feel like the thing that I liked about Tech N9ne with this stylish song Slacker is the fact that it doesn't really feel like an at the house song, although it can be just by the lyrics, but it feels kind of more of like a stepping out, just going simple places, shopping, going to the movies, uh, seeing the city lights, that type of stuff. Just simple, simplistic places where you're just kind of having a light social jive towards it. It's not really a nightclub or clubs bop, but it's also not necessarily like a just sitting at home kind of jam either. So it's just kind of the concept where it's just a little bit of a flashy, basic stepping out kind of feel towards it. But I do like how that song turned out. It's a nice one. The most popular song on this album, at least in terms of Spotify, is the second single, "I'm a Tell." I remember this song being popular. I definitely think that this is definitely a song that gets played at the gathering, the juggalos and stuff. Definitely an underground hit, and that type of stuff. Has a pretty catchy chorus. Just that kind of chipmunk soul sample on there. It's not necessarily chipmunk soul, but just kind of that sped up sample that kind of happened throughout the 2000s and stuff. This is a good example of doing that. And I'm a Tell is basically like a bleary kind of city night tune. This has a really glitzy and kind of hollow beat, but this is definitely one where I feel like the city traverse of like Slacker. This one's a little bit more at night, kind of a little bit bleary and just kind of a little bit slurred out. Maybe you've had a couple swishers or something like that. Just kind of gives me that sort of vibe. So that one's just a nice highlight. Here Comes Tech N9ne as the third single. And this one's a lot more summery. This one definitely feels like it's in the club. This is a vanilla club bop on here. It just has a real kind of uh, light, kind of hazy, really kind of tilted a little bit guitar licks on the song. This one just really kind of turns into a thumper midway through the verse, but I do like the kind of poundiness of it. This one just really feels like you've got some drinks in your system, and it just really feels like a summery kind of tipsy kind of night and that type of stuff. This really has that hot weather kind of energy. This is definitely, there need to be more songs like this on the album. That's not to say this album is slacking. So this is an overall hit. This is the only song off this album that charted, hit 40 on the rhythmic radio. This is a good hit to get introduced to Tech N9ne with. I would have to say this is a pretty rock solid one for that sort of thing. And the chorus is a little bit pounding, a little bit thumping. It's not quite as accessible as like some of these, but you have to understand that the thing about Tech N9ne is he's underground and he just kind of comes from an off to the side kind of category where you have to kind of have at least somewhat of a learning curve to get used to some of his stuff. Now, there are hits on here. I'd probably recommend out of the singles I'd go with first would probably be I'm a Playa. That's the most accessible out of the four singles, but I do feel like Slacker's a pretty nice one too. It's just an easy kind of sleazy bop. And I'm a Tell is like the Juggalo one. And then I feel like Here Comes Tech N9ne is kind of a rhythmic kind of one. This kind of like a summery kind of drinks up kind of bop. That's just kind of the thing. So speaking of I'm a Playa, that's the fourth single. And this is a vanilla nightclub tune. Definitely a nice jivey kind of jam on here. Just has a real kind of glitzy energy about it. It's been a while since I've listened to this song, but it just really comes off as like a simplistic kind of nightclub tune, just like a standard regular day on a night out and that type of stuff. Yeah, it just has a real cosmetic kind of energy about it. I just definitely like this one. The chorus is pretty powerful. It's sampled from another song. This is an overall highlight. This is probably a signature song from Tech N9ne, apart from songs like Caribou Lou and like some of those songs off of All Sixes and Sevens and some of those type numbers. I feel like this is definitely a highlight from Tech N9ne. Now, there are songs like Einstein and some of those type songs off of Angelic that are pretty highlighted, especially in the underground sense. But I feel like in terms of where Tech N9ne was in his early days, this was probably about as commercial as he got up until 2006, 4 years later when Ever Ready the Religion came out with Caribou Lou and stuff. But this is definitely a highlight. And really, this, like I said, this is the most accessible of the four singles. In terms of the rest of the album, there are 16 songs on here if you slash the four skits. I just would have to say, out of those 16 songs, I wound up recommending to you 12. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend those 12 songs. So the 12 songs would be Trapped in a Psycho's Body, T9X, She Devil, Here Comes Tech N9ne, I'm a Tell, Slither, Yada Yada Yada, I'm a Playa, Absolute Power, the title track, Bianca's and Beatrice's, Keep On Keeping On, and Slacker. So to talk about some of these hits, I really feel like Slither is probably one of the best beats on this whole album. It's a very kinky and kind of slurred out song. Definitely a strip club classic on here. This one just oozes kind of strip club energy towards it, just to see some nice women winding and that type of stuff, just kind of twerking, just slow wine, that sort of stuff at the strip club and a night venue and that type of stuff. Just an easy highlight. I like the chick on the chorus that really complimented the song. Tech could have kind of done most of this chorus, but he let a chick on here kind of do it also, so it's pretty good to kind of get that. Yada 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 and Keep On Keeping On are two day commute songs. I kind of like that Tech N9ne kind of did this day commute stuff, because this is an area that bigger rappers like Eminem and Ludacris and Jay-Z didn't really do, where these just kind of feel like work a day, not necessarily nightclub, not necessarily dance club, and not necessarily like just blue collar, but they're just kind of day commute, just being in your car, just driving around. Maybe you're going to Target, maybe you're going to like maybe you're going to the gas station, just around town. Maybe you're going to Taco Bell or something, just standard places, just in the day commute, just running errands, paying bills, that type of stuff. Just really kind of work a day and everyday and regular and that type of stuff. I like both of these both the beats on Yada 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 and Keep On Keeping On are pretty similar. They just have a real bleary and kind of blurry kind of production on there. I really like the synthy kind of blurriness that they have. They're just really kind of relatable and congenial. So I really like those two tunes. They're really nice. Um, there's a fancy song on here. I really felt like Bianca's and Beatrice's was this is the fanciest song on here. It's kind of odd for this flirty kind of song, where really they talk about these Biancas and Beatrices being like, thoughts and sluts and that type of stuff. I just kind of look after it. It's just a very fancy way of talking about that sort of thing. The chandelier kind of like, I don't know what the type of production that's on the song is called, but it just really feels like around chandeliers and fancy windows and that type of stuff. This flirty and ritzy kind of pace kind of song, but I like it. Cut Calhoun's on here and he does a nice job. It's one of his earlier appearances. She Devil is a real nice one. This is another one that's similar to Slither. This one's kind of a blurry nightclub song. It has D12 on here minus Eminem, but I did like getting another song with Tech N9ne and Bizarre. Bizarre and Tech N9ne have teamed up in other circumstances, so this is a good one initial for that. But this is a real freaky deaky kind of slinky kind of beat on here. It's like the fact of all six of these guys rapping about standard she devil sluts and that type of stuff. It's just a blurry nightclub kind of song. Just definitely works in like a slinky kind of energy. Just has a nice synthy kind of beat in there. And T9X is a really druggy song. I like this song. It's just very blurry and druggy. It's just a low-key kind of club song, very trippy. And just I like the chorus on this one. This is a real kind of drugged out, kind of devilish and ghostly kind of song on there. Really like that one. Trapped in a Psycho's Body has one of the best beats on here. This one has a really kind of haunting and ominous piano beat, but I definitely see it as like a hazy, trippy kind of song that really feels like a smoke powwow kind of song. Just a powwow in your backyard, something like that. Just passing the blunts around, smoking, that type of stuff in the backyard and that sort of thing. Just one of those simplistic ones. Definitely some of these. I mean, there's just a lot of good festivities on here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I haven't covered. Oh yeah, Absolute Power, the title track. This is another nice nightclub bop. This one's probably one of the more simplistic ones. This one's kind of vanilla. This one, Absolute Power, is kind of vanilla, but I do like the kind of solid night out energy of it. This one's similar to like Slacker and I'm a Tell and some of those type ones. This is kind of another decent one for stepping out, but this one's just a little bit more. Oh yeah, and I'm a Playa. So I would say that Absolute Power is pretty similar to I'm a Playa. Absolute Power is pretty similar to I'm a Playa, I'm a Tell, and like maybe She Devil and some of those type ones. It's just kind of a nice vanilla nightclub kind of song, just a simple, solid night out and that sort of thing. It's just got simplistic energy, but it's just a good one. Tech has some good ravenous lyrics on some of these. That just kind of happens to be the concept. So there are some folks on here, but because there's not an overabundance of information, like I know Chris Calico is on here a couple of times. I know he at least spits a verse on I'm a Playa, but it's just not an overabundance. I don't know how many times he really shows up. He's on here at least a couple times. Cut Calhoun's on here once. Apparently Scatterman and Snug Brim are on here, but I couldn't figure out what song. And there are guests on here, but it just kind of depends. Like Big Scoob is on this album. That's one. He's on one of the songs I didn't enjoy, but he kind of Big Scoob is one of the cats from the 57th Street Rogue Dog Villains on Constantly Dirty. But that's just one of the songs I didn't enjoy. So to talk about some of these ones that I didn't enjoy on here, which is really only 4 songs out of 16, I just would have to say I really didn't like one of the worst beats on here was Worst Enemy. That one just had like a real kind of orchestral and violin-esque energy on it that just really didn't fit this album at all. I mean, I liked Bianca's and Beatrice's. That one pulled it off. That one wasn't orchestral, but I just feel like what they were trying to do with Worst Enemy just really was pretty poor and didn't work. Constantly Dirty really reminded me of a song that Tupac would do back in 1995 or 1996. It has that kind of mellow, kind of ghetto and kind of struggle hustle kind of feel towards it. But I don't know. I almost liked it, but it was just that one's really low key. I mean, that was almost an almost song, but it just kind of felt a little bit more muddled than I would have liked from it. But I did like the concept of Big Scoop being on there, and it just kind of gave me some Tupac kind of vibes in like his old days. I didn't really like the production of Energy as Punks. That one just didn't quite have enough pulse towards it to really get me going. And then Guns Will Bust was another kind of crummy beat on here that just didn't have the proper energy for what it needed to. These are it's minimal the amount of awkward songs on here. They're not notable, these 4 songs that I listed for you, but it's just kind of it's a small complaint in the overall grand scheme of the package of what this album has to offer. So me basically me basically liking 12 songs out of 16 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this album a 9.25 out of 10. I really enjoyed this project. It was rock solid. Lots of Juggalo energy, lots of underground energy, and just an overall underground highlight. Very similar to Angelic. These are 2 of Tech N9ne's best albums, and this just has like such ravenous energy and built up his legacy pretty quickly. These are definitely kind of underground classics in a lot of ways. I would almost say the Absolute Power is kind of like a classic for like the underdog in that sense. Just, I mean, I know folks wouldn't admit, at least mainstream folks wouldn't admit the Absolute Power by Tech N9ne is a classic, but it's definitely damn good. It's better than a lot of stuff that gets labeled a classic in some senses that may not actually be, especially 20 or 30 or 15 or 10 years later or something. That just really happens to be a thing. But this is definitely one of the best rap albums of the 2000s, bar none. This really happens to be a thing. The social score, I'm going to give the social score a 10 out of 10 because all 4 of the singles hit. There's plenty of great beats. This is an excellent produced album. Has some good guests on here, some good slinky beats like Slither, Trapped in a Psycho's Body, T9X, She Devil, I'm a Playa, Slacker, you know, just bunches of these that just Bianca's and Beatrice's, just plenty of good productions to go around. It just has some real crunchy kind of just forefront AAA kind of productions on here that just really kicks a lot of ass. I just would have to say you're in for a treat if you want sonically pleasing kind of albums. So Tech N9ne really outdid himself. So in terms of the future, like Tech N9ne has been kind of quiet in recent times, but I just would have to say that this is definitely a highlight, and I'm going to have to get to some more Tech N9ne as time goes along. This is an easy kind of one to pick up and fuck with.